Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Girly by Sky Society. Today I am chatting with Jessica Cattaneo. She is Head of Product Development at Boy Smells. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on your podcast.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm super excited to talk through your career journey. Jessica and I were just chatting and just going through some of her interesting roles that she's had before. She's worked for quite a long time at L Brands and has her own agency that she does as well. And then also right now is head of product development at Boy Smells, like we mentioned. So really excited to kind of walk through your career journey and how you ended up here. But before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Thanks for the intro. So, I'm actually originally from Portland, Maine. I'm at the age of 19. I moved to New York City to go to the Fashion Institute of Technology. From there, I was really interested in product development, more in the apparel space. And one summer, I needed a paid internship. So, I actually applied to an internship at Bath and Body Works and basically fell in love with the fragrance industry from there. I thought it was just so exciting, so new, and so different. I thought you had to be a chemist. I thought you had to go to school for some sort of a science background. So I just fell in love with beauty. And then from there on out, I really just stayed on, to your point, with the company for about 13 years. Worked in between the sister brand Victoria's Secret and Bath and Body Works that were fully owned at the time by L Brands. And stayed on, kind of bounced around, like I said, between the brands, moved my way up kind of the corporate ladder. And then when COVID hit, I think everyone felt a little bit differently about what they were doing. I lived in New York City for, again, 15 years at that point in time. I was married. I had a pretty stable career. And then I just decided, hey, what if I move back up to Maine where I'm from and work from home until the office opens? I think a lot of people were kind of, working out of different areas at that time. And then, I always say this, to make a long story long, I reunited with my 8th grade boyfriend and got divorced, actually, just outgrew my relationship, and then decided, what am I going to do next? I really didn't want to work in corporate America, but I learned so much. I have so many relationships I cultivated. And I created an LLC after my daughter, Gigi. So took time off to have that child of mine, my little girl, and then got the opportunity to start consulting at Boy Smells. So started last summer, in the summer of 2024. And then this past January, I got brought on as head of product development. So I've had an interesting career journey coming out of New York City and then moving my way back up to New England. So it's actually been super exciting and fun.
Yes, what a wild ride. And I'm curious, you mentioned this like big shift, not just in your career, but also in your life during this pandemic era. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. Sky Society was born out of the pandemic as well. It's a pandemic baby. So I can relate very heavily to that. But kind of as you touched on too, it wasn't just your job, it was also your relationship. What does it feel like now? Does it back at, like you said, mentioned you spent 13 years at one company. You were in a marriage that was a really long time, and then going to meeting somebody new, quitting your job, starting your own thing, having a baby, like so many things in your life changed. How do you feel different now and kind of where you are?
So it's interesting, in hindsight, it was really tough. And I think that happens to a lot of us, right? You feel like in your gut that something needs to change and you're afraid to change it. And that's kind of what was happening to me. I didn't know. I knew I wanted to get a new career opportunity, maybe with an indie brand, but I didn't know how that would happen, especially being up in this area. And then, being with a partner for so long and being so comfortable, I think everyone just gets super comfortable where they're at too, but they want to change. I think I just dug really deep and just kind of made that move. I kind of like pulled the rug out from underneath myself and just thought, okay, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do this. And I felt like, too, working for such a big company, I stayed there for so long that my goal was to be in leadership, was to be senior level. But I felt like that I would have had to be there for a lot longer time period. And that's okay. But I think at this point in my life and with the pandemic, it really made me realize, okay, it's now or never. And now I feel like I'm in a much better place mentally because there's so many pressures in society of stress, especially on younger women and kind of what they want to do with their lives. So it's hard to make that jump, but I think it's well worth it in the end if you know that you can do it and you know that you have support and resources behind you.
Yeah, I mean, leaving anything that you've been at for a while, whether that's a relationship or a job or living in a city or anything, like changes, like you said, it's not easy at all. And that's a lot of big changes that you made for yourself at once. Do you have any other advice for someone who may be like, because one I hear a lot specifically is on the job side of someone who has been at a job for a long time and it's hard to leave, especially when you have all of your friends there and you built these relationships and connections, and kind of advice for someone who's like, I feel like I'm not super happy here, but I'm not sure if leaving is the right option or if I have the courage to leave.
I think my biggest piece of advice is, I don't know, I think for me, I was really scared. I had a lot of anxiety. I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought, oh my gosh, and at that time I didn't even have a job. I was like, what am I gonna do? I mean, I'm gonna leave here. I don't really know where I'm gonna go next, but I just know that I can't be on this grind anymore. Again, COVID. I was working remotely, and then we had to return back to the office. So I would say, definitely confiding in people within like your tribe or within like your network even. If everyone has those like coworkers that they can talk to that, like you said, are your friends inside and outside of work. And I think it's just just have to make that move, and you just have to do it, because the more you think about it, you'll just want to stay. And I think that was something that I just had to do. But again, it was a lot of growing pains. I felt a little bit irrelevant for a while in the industry. I thought, oh my gosh, my products are not going to launch, for a year or two. I'm freaking out, am I going to stay relevant in my industry? And then what ended up happening with this role is that I really thought, oh my gosh, how cool would it be to work for a smaller beauty brand and still be able to be remote and be with my family. And I was able to manage that, but it wasn't easy to get there. It definitely was a lot of hurdles.
Yeah, well, it's inspiring to hear your experience and your journey doing that because, yeah, like I mentioned and kind of like how you touched on, those aren't easy things to change. And obviously, we get to go to the end part where we know it all worked out. So we get to cheat a little bit in this story because we're a couple years past that. So can you tell me a little bit about, we're going to go back and go through your career journey a bit more, but I want to kind of start with your role at Boy Smells. So what does your role as head of product development entail?
So basically, I think product development is really interesting how it's done at a lot of companies. When you look at like the Unilevers of the world and a lot of the bigger consumer product companies, a lot of the times product development, you truly need to have a science background, and you're really working very closely with marketing. So in this role in particular, I rely pretty heavily on the fragrance suppliers and what we like to call the contract manufacturers who actually fill the products and create the formulas. So my goal being in this role right now is to be definitely on the creative side when it comes to product development life cycle, so concept to what ends up launching, and then also on the supply chain side and making sure that things can truly scale up as we think about growth within this business over the next 5 years. So it's kind of cool because I am definitely like supply chain meets creative. And then I rely very heavily on direction from the head of sales and merchandising, in addition to the owners and investors of the brand. So, and just making sure that with any company you're working for, you're targeting that customer and making sure that you're really listening to them and what their needs are. Because I think once you get away from that, they'll start to notice, they'll start to, drift away and move over to something else. So within this role, it's really just tapping into what's happening. So I think working for this younger brand, which is truly trying to target a Gen Z gel audience, has been something really interesting to me, being in the world of Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret, which has a little bit of an older demographic.
What are some of the biggest changes you've noticed in this younger demographic compared to the demographic of Bad, Bath? Every time I say Bath and Body Works, I want to say Bed Bath and Beyond.
No, my dad, literally my whole family is like, do you still work for them? I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, I don't. So I would have to say that the Gen Z, and it's funny, I'm like dating myself, but I do have nieces and nephews in this demographic, but I just think they're very unapologetic and they want what they want. And I think that's pretty cool. I think they don't really follow trends. They kind of make the trends. And I think just even from a fragrance ingredient standpoint, it's really interesting to see what they're liking, how they're influenced. There's a big movement right now in the non-alcoholic space, so people are not afraid to kind of do things that are against the norm. I think, you see people that are in the Gen Z and they're like, not saying that they're not going to bars or not partying and they're not doing those things, but everyone's kind of like following their own path. There's so much individualism. So it's kind of like for a brand, you obviously can't have 1,000 products to tailored to every single person. So it's just kind of navigating and seeing what makes the most sense for that consumer. And just it's very colorful too, I would have to say. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening with the Boy Smells brand, but just navigating the trend aspect of it. Again, post COVID, what are they into? And then I think also too, there are some similarities to Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret with working for this personal care brand, because there is a seasonal element to the American consumer. They're going to love things that smell nostalgic to them at certain times of year. Everyone still loves their pumpkin spice latte.
Yes,
People
we
like to
do.
smell like a pumpkin spice latte.
Interesting. And then also one of my favorite parts when I get to interview guests is that there's so much about these roles that us as consumers don't think about on the everyday, right? We might see Boy Smells come out with a new scent and we judge it or we perceive it or we buy it, but we rarely think about the entire journey that came up to like this scent being the one that the company chose to came out with. And I'm curious, what are some things that us everyday people might not know about the development process of fragrances?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. So there's so many things. I think when you're even just thinking about developing a fragrance, I think it's more or less just understanding the bang for your buck that the customer is going to get, how much money they're going to be spending on it. You want to make sure that it's a great experience for them from when they spray it onto your skin, and then towards the end of the day, it still has that long lasting element. So I would say definitely with Boy Smells and what we're about to talk about a little bit later in the pod is that there is going to be this long lasting factor that consumers are looking for. So it really is trial and error in the sense of trying the fragrances on your skin, making sure there's a long lasting quality, and then making sure that the ingredients are substantiated. So, meaning if you're spraying something that might be like a top note, let's just say of like a black currant or like a pink berry, you want to be able to spray that and you really don't want it to go away right away, right? You want it to kind of last a little bit longer. And there is definitely a science to it, there's a balance, but then you know that the dry down on your skin could be woody, for instance. So you want to make sure that you're getting that as well. So, again, really getting the character of the fragrance throughout that journey is definitely key. But in addition to that, how are you incorporating fun ingredients that make sense to the brand as well? Because one fragrance could have thousands of ingredients, right? Anything from like safe synthetics, because I think synthetics get a really bad rap in the industry. They are safe, they are molecules, they do kind of replicate what's happening in nature. And then what are those natural ingredients that are truly beautiful where, people are working in, different countries and supporting their families by cultivating these ingredients. So there's just so much level of detail that goes into it and so much artistry. And then working with the fragrance suppliers is so fascinating because you have a whole dedicated team to your account, understanding your customer, from a salesperson to an evaluator that works with a perfumer to someone that's in marketing that's helping coming up with the name to the person in the lab. So really all hands are on deck just for one submission that you're evaluating to get down to the one that's going to launch.
That is an incredible. Yeah, and it's also interesting, as you mentioned earlier, you don't have a science or chemist background. That's correct?
Yes, yeah.
And have you just kind of developed this knowledge just through years of being in the industry?
Yeah, so what was great at Bath and Body Works is that I went to a lot of fragrance suppliers and kind of trained on site with perfumers, and they really took me through like different types of palettes, whether it was like naturals or safe synthetics, of floral notes, woody notes, citrus notes, fruity notes. Took me through lineage of fragrances, fragrances that might have, that might have like frankincense, which was like the original fragrances that were possibly worn by Egyptians, to Chanel number 5 and the meaning behind that. And then what are those top 20, what we call NPD? So, we know that like Coco Mademoiselle and, Chance Otandra were like 1 and 2, but then Baccarat Rouge came in. So getting training and understanding history and then what's trending now from a sales data perspective, I've gotten about 15 years of that, just working closely with the suppliers. So that was something that for me made me feel really lucky because I wasn't on the bench necessarily, but I was able to understand them and how they develop.
That's incredible. And so would that be your advice for someone who's like, this industry sounds so fascinating to me. I really want to work in it. Is your advice just pick a company that can show you the ropes, or kind of what would you tell someone who like really wants to break into it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think no matter how big or how small the company is, having that conversation with your manager, with leadership, to say, I'm really interested in product development, because sometimes you could start out as a coordinator. Maybe for me, I was just labeling blotters for meetings, right? For the merchants and the product development team to smell things. So I started out kind of like in that role. And then I thought, oh my gosh, how cool would it be if I really just kept learning and growing and kind of like, figuring those things out. So I think having those conversations up front of saying like, I'm really interested, I really want to grow here. I know I'm entry level, but I see this for myself is definitely key for sure.
Yeah, because like I think sometimes thinking of or like I can just hear you speak about this and just see how much you know about it and how intelligent you are talking about it, and it is inspiring to me just to hear that. But you can really tell like you have put in so much time and so much experience in that space, and I am a huge believer as well, and like the best way to learn something is to do it, and experience is probably going to be your best education, especially sometimes in roles like these.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And your background, so let's talk a little bit with you entering the space in the beginning. So
Yeah.
you went to fit, that's correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And obviously, again, we know you're not in fashion right now. You kind of went the product development route. So can you talk to me a little bit about this like early time in your career? I know you went to L Brands like a year after graduating. So you go to Fit, you get this degree in merchandising management, and then talk to me about like that decision to kind of go to L Brands.
Oh my gosh. So it is funny because I did have a lot of like earlier fashion jobs. I worked for like a luxury designer as an intern and then her personal assistant. She would sell $7,000 rabbit furs to Bergdorf Goodman. So I got to like work in the fur
Oh, wow.
district. This is all while I was at FIT. And then I wanted to stay in New York for one summer. So I worked as a showroom sales assistant for, I guess, what would now be called Sustainable. It's a made to order bridesmaid dress company that was called Simple Silhouettes. It was in Martha Stewart weddings. So I actually sold bridesmaids dresses and bride dresses, and again, still was in fashion. It was really kind of cutting edge at the time. Simple Silhouettes, you can see it on Pinterest. It's no longer there. It was in Soho. And then, like I said, I needed a paid internship one summer, and this was before graduating FIT. So then I was like, okay, this is similar to product development and apparel. What is this? And then as soon as I interviewed and entered this world, I thought, oh my gosh, like, isn't this company out of Ohio? Because L Brands that's where their headquarters were. And they were like, we have an office in Soho. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so cool that I get to like work down here and that this is like a secret office. And then from there, I just really just learned so much that summer. However, I went to Macy's merchandising group when I graduated. So I did work for Bath and Body Works for a 3-month internship. And then they kept me on the fall of 2010. And then in December 2010, I got offered a Macy's merchandising group, being a product assistant in their executive training program. And I thought, oh my gosh, fragrance and beauty is so cool, but I did go to school for fashion. Should I just try this out and see? So I did start that program, and then this is going to sound strange. I kept having dreams about being back in beauty when I started at Macy's, because even though I thought it was a great dynamic environment, when you go to FIT, they really talk to you about the Macy's programs, especially in buying, planning, and product development, which they call like a product assistant. So it's funny that I actually did kind of bounce around so much between these smaller jobs and then a training program. But then I think for me, I'm just a firm believer of whatever's meant to be is meant to be. So I ended up wiggling my way back in. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I bounced between Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret. So I went to Victoria's Secret in 2011 and I worked in research and development, even though, again, I didn't have that background. But in entry level, you didn't have to be a chemist. And so that's when I learned like science 101 of the beauty industry. So I worked again for the sister company within L Brands. So that was kind of cool. That was like very random, but I learned a lot about like 101 chemistry and beauty and things like that.
That is so interesting. Again, coming from a fashion background too, and like here you are in the lab,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
So you touched on like you were at L Brands or kind of Victoria's Secret. I know you mentioned Victoria's Secret ended up branching off, but you were there for over 10 years. What were some of the good things and the bad things of being at a company, a big company for so many years?
So the good things definitely were understanding how each department worked and how you would cross-functionally collaborate with them. That was something that I genuinely loved because I mean, there's even a person at Bath and Body Works that decides the soundtrack for the stores, right? So like
Oh
you're
my
kind of
goodness,
on,
you would never
yeah,
think about that.
right. So, and I was doing fragrance training for them once, and the whole marketing team. So you're like, wow, these roles truly exist. I mean, my role I thought was really cool. I'm like, whoa, you're deciding what the playlist is in the summertime. I mean, that's pretty fun. And then just getting to learn what each role does. I mean, I think especially in the beauty industry, regulatory is huge. Just making sure that your products are safe, that they can sell in various countries, whether it's domestic or global. So again, those different departments that you never would think about was something where I felt like what I would do is I would just immediately set up an onboarding, whether they were in the New York office or the Ohio office, and I would have a one-on-one touch base to learn more about their role. So I was always curious. I always stayed curious, and because I'm a chatty Cathy and a little bit outgoing, but mind you, I love to like rot in my spare time and not really do anything.
You need balance.
Yeah, I got the balance. I really put myself out there to really meet people and understand what they do. So that was definitely a positive for me. And then the exposure to all the, what was happening from like the fragrance trend space and the beauty space and being in PD was really cool because that was, of course, what brought the product into the stores. What was challenging was, I was one out of almost 30 in my department in product development. So everyone, again, was super talented. They were all my friends. We all worked together. We would go to happy hours together. And I felt like, oh my gosh, like everyone's so good here. Everyone's so talented. And that's when I felt like I wish I could have moved up quicker, and I couldn't because, again, you're one of 30. And there was nothing wrong with what your performance was necessarily, but that was something for me where I was like, should I have left earlier to make more money, to get that title change, to learn something new? Because, again, every company operates very differently. So that was something for me, at least, where I felt like, okay, I probably could have left a little bit earlier, but when I circled back around to Victoria's Secret in 2021, I really liked that what I was doing there too, even though I was there for about 10 years at the time between both companies, because that brand has undergone so many changes, I think more than most brands.
Yeah.
So that was interesting for me and seeing, again, the pendulum swings with these brands. Sometimes it's like we're going to have a collaboration and a licensing agreement, and we might collaborate. Right now, Bath and Body Works has it with Disney, right? So on the Victoria's Secret side, you would see, would we do a fragrance with a bra launch? So I got to learn so much. So I don't necessarily regret it. I think I more or less regret that I had so much knowledge and so much experience that I felt like what I'm doing now, don't get me wrong, is great. And it's where I meant to be and it's perfect. But I think if I left a little bit earlier, I might have gotten a little bit further up in my career. And, you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
you hear that advice a lot, right? Of like, to make more money, you have to leave, or to get
Yeah.
promoted, you have to leave. And you're absolutely right. There's both sides to it. Of there's absolutely a lot of pros of staying with the company, you know, growing, learning those friendships that you mentioned, or just being loyal to one company. And it's interesting hearing both sides. And again, like I've had guests that have done both, some that are switching every couple of years and some that are
Yeah.
staying for a while. And I also feel like it changes with the trends too. I think it used to be like really common to stay at a company for a long time, and now we're starting to see more of that switching be more common.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes, especially being at voicemails, we're trying to build out our team and someone will be in a role for like 6 months and then I'm questioning to someone else on the team. I'm like, is that okay? Is that a red flag? And then people are, younger than me and they're like, no, no, that's cool. That's like good that they did. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's right or what's wrong as long as they're passionate and, have work ethic and they really care. So it is funny seeing that because if talking to you, would think I'm, I don't know, 80 years old, but I just feel like I'm starting to understand what's happening with the market these days. And I think it's great. People are like saying taking those risks, but doing it a lot sooner maybe than what I just did.
Yeah. But then again, I think I recently read an article somewhere that it's like you no longer can get the big raises by jumping companies anymore. And
Oh,
and I'm not sure that's of course one article, but I just think
yeah.
it goes with anything in life. There's always things are going to trend for a while, then they're going to go back the other way. And I feel like now, just I even think among my friends too, is like people do really want authenticity and they do want connections. And so I hope it'll kind of go back more towards where like you want to stay with the company and you want to grow with them. I know for me, I hope anyone that works for Sky Society wants to stay and grow. So we'll see where the trends go. But I have noticed recently it's been like the jumping around a lot, but I'm hoping we'll kind of go back a little bit more to like staying at least for a decent amount of years.
Well, they'd be silly not to stay with you guys because what you're doing for young women in their careers is amazing. So I can
Thank
come
you,
on one
thank you.
day. I can
If
come to
anyone's
one.
listening, but I hope so too. And I'm sure you've learned with your career too. Is like hopefully when you're doing work for a company with you really align with the mission and what they're doing, that makes it a lot easier to stay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about that switch and starting your own agency, having a daughter, and then going into voice smells. Can you talk a little bit about this trip? So you start your own agency. I'm assuming this is why while you had your daughter Gigi, because I know you named it after Gigi.
Yeah.
Yes. So what was it like being a new mom and then also balancing career?
Oh my gosh. It was hard because, again, I wasn't really expecting to work. I kind of honestly took roughly 18 months off between when I left Victoria's Secret and then created Gigi Beauty Inc. Consulting. So I was scared. I was intimidated. I felt like, oh my gosh, I want to spend all this time with my daughter. But then at the same time, I want her to socially grow. So at that time, I didn't really know because I wasn't full time in this voicemails role yet. So I was just trying to figure out, okay, well, maybe if she naps, I can get some work done or I can have some meetings. And I guess I was kind of, we keep talking about COVID throughout this conversation, but that's kind of how I felt. I was like, okay, this is a work from home with a kid. A lot of people did this. This is fine. And then I realized, I want her to have a great life. I want her to reach for her dreams. And that's when I was really excited when they approached me to work full time because I thought, okay, she can go to school. She can meet like little friends her age, and we're not just here all day. When she was a baby, we did watch Vanderpump Rules. She probably doesn't remember that, but now, she's watching her shows and she's interacting and socializing, and it's healthy for both of us because, like I said, fragrance is my passion and my hobby, and it's my career. So the fact that I was even able to do that working from home while she was at school, which she is happening currently, has really been great. It wasn't easy in the beginning. I had a lot of mom guilt. I know a lot of people talk about that, feeling very guilty, but it was definitely healthy because, coming where I came from and working my way up, I didn't want to stop. I felt like I'm in this like mid to senior point in my career, and I felt like I just had to keep going. So I'm glad I made that decision, but it took a while to get me there, definitely.
Yeah. And then do you think it's kind of changed how you show up in your career now compared to not having a daughter before?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to work and things like that, I definitely feel like, well, it's interesting because Voicemails is out of LA. So I find myself also working different hours, which is really great in terms of like the flexibility. So I'm able to, I guess, figure out my day a little bit differently than maybe I would when I was younger, where I constantly, not that I'm still not on the grind. I just show up a little bit differently, I would say, from a working perspective, and I'm able to prioritize things a lot easier. Maybe because I have a whole other list of what I need to do for her. So I feel like I'm able to be more focused and get things done maybe a little bit quicker because I know that I have to go tend to her and get her to bed at night. So it's definitely a balance. It's not always perfect. Some days are easier than others. There's more attention on my job one day and then more attention to her the other, but I just try my best and again show up the best way I can in both areas. It's not a walk in the park, but I'm trying. I'm learning every day.
Yeah, and I think it's good to hear. Obviously, on the podcast, I only interview women, and so
Yeah.
this is something that I think for all of us, if you want to have kids, you like know one day it's gonna, you're gonna have to take a break from your career. You're gonna have to step away, and how long you're gonna step away is gonna be everyone's unique decision. But I feel like it's something that inevitably comes on your mind, a decision that you have to make, and something that I feel like as women, generally the responsibility of that falls more heavily on our shoulders than if you have a partner. So it's always interesting for me to hear. I don't have kids yet, not close to it, but I always love asking just because I think it's also inspiring to hear a lot like your answers of like how it really shifts. Even, yeah, like you said, how you show up in the office. It's not like you're working less, but you're thinking about how can I be more efficient or how can I make sure my time here is spent the most. I'm prioritizing the right things so that I can prioritize other things in my life as well.
Yeah, even if you have like a pet, honestly, I mean, I hear
Yeah,
people like, I need to get back to my dog. I remember even just when I was
true
working in New
facts.
York, I need to get back to my, like, of course you do, like they want to see like
Yeah.
their mommy or daddy and you want to take them for a walk or, spend time with them. I mean, everyone has that in different ways, whether you have a kid or not. And I think that's something that I guess that's the beauty of life is that you have more than just maybe your career, but it also is a big part of you. I mean, you still want to do well in your career and do things that you love. So it's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you start your own agency, you end up doing some work for Boy Smells, they bring you on full time. And one of the reasons that they brought you on full time was to assist with their rebrand. So we're talking about this pre April 11th, but this episode will go live on April 11th. So can you share, not on April 11th, this episode will go live after April
Yeah,
11th, but that'd be great timing if it did.
that'd be cool.
Can you share a little bit about what that process has been like and like being brought on specifically to the team to really help facilitate such a huge change?
Yeah, no. So when I was interviewing, I honestly didn't know until I interviewed what I was going to be brought on for. So I was really excited when they said, okay, Boy Smells has been around for roughly 10 years. The owners at the time obviously did an incredible job with the brand. They have a lot of cult favorites, like Hinoki Phantom is like an amazing, incredible, like woody, smoky, like such a great fragrance, one of their best sellers. You recognize them with like kind of this millennial pink and black packaging. It's sold at Sephora. And again, new owners and investors took it over and they were kind of like, okay, so what's next for this brand? We still want to tailor to the girls, and they're saying we're tailoring to the girls and the gays because it is an
Love
all-inclusive
it.
brand, which I love. And again, how are we going to bring life to it? How are we going to change up the packaging? How are we going to look at the current fragrance assortment and how are we going to commercialize it further? So that was something that you'll see coming out over the next month is that a lot of your favorite fragrances that you've been wearing or that you've seen for years are actually reformulated to be a little bit more long lasting on skin, what I talked about earlier with fragrance formulation. The fragrances are again a little bit easier. So you'll see that. And then again, the packaging change is incredible. I will quickly show you. This is just a fragrance that's called Sugar Baby. It's going to be sold actually at
So
Sephora. Oh, thanks. I can't say I came up with a name, but I helped with the fragrance development. So the packaging, again, you still have the traditional pink on the bottom in the glass, but what's really cool about, new scents that we're coming out with is, they tailor to all walks of life. However, this one's really cool. It's kind of like the spun sugar note with this musky second skin. And then there's some threads of these like aromatic notes. So again, it's super wearable, but again, not overtly sweet, even though the name can kind of lead you to that. But again, this is just kind of like what the brand's, transitioning into what we're calling Boy Smells 2.0. So this is one of the newer scents that will be sold everywhere probably, but I think right now it's Sephora and online starting in mid to late April.
that bottle is gorgeous, and even that box is stunning.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, the owners and investors, they are amazing. They have a great design eye. So I think we're just making it special. I think, again, the brand, again, has such great history. People know about it, has a great buzz. And again, just trying to stay like really playful with the naming, but just making sure that we're really there from the product quality standpoint. And again, the brand itself really was ahead of its time in the fragrance industry. Honestly, I was always looking at them. They had a fragrance that was called like rhubarb smoke. I'm like, oh my gosh, rhubarb. Not a lot of people know rhubarb. This is really
Yeah.
cool. So now it's like taking these things, commercializing them a little bit further. And I think that's why they brought me in with my background at Bath and Body Works is I have that commercial development nose, I guess. And then, yeah, we're getting like, again, new formulations across the board in terms of our wax formula. So everyone knows like the bestseller, like Woodphoria. This fragrance, again, has a brand new wax formula. It definitely has more of an even burn. Again, an incredible fragrance experience, but you'll see like a lot of adjustments being made, being phased in along the way. But again, just something really exciting that we're doing. So I couldn't be more proud to work on this alongside everyone. They do say it takes a village, but we're really just a really small team, and everyone's been really just heads down and just working at this honestly over the past year.
I love it. I can see all the boxes in your background
Oh
too.
yeah.
They look
Am I
so
going the right? I'm a
colorful and so
hoarder, so am
cute.
I going the right way? I don't know.
So cute.
There they
I
are.
love them. What is it like? Because I know whenever we talk about reformulation, especially when it comes to fragrances, people who are like cult favorites of the brand likely get really scared, right? Because you're reformulating something that I've used, I've loved, and I know you guys are also coming out with new scents and stuff as well. So how do you make sure that you are still like, well, even though you're coming out with something new and exciting and hopefully better, that you are still like staying true and serving the people that have loved the brand for a decade?
No, and that's a really good question. And honestly, I've heard that so much over my career, especially when we would take things away at Bath and Body Works and Victoria's Secret, like, no, why are you getting rid of this? But I think the fragrances that the customer knows and loves are staying around, especially with the candles. I think with the fine fragrances, it's a wearability, but you will see ingredients that you know and love. And I think the ingredients that the customer loves are definitely still there. I think it's just enhancing them, softening them up a little bit. But I think what you'll start to see too, as more, to your point, more newness comes through, is if you like this, then you'll buy this. And I think you'll start to see that shift of, if you like vanilla era, then you're going to like XYZ. So I think that will start to happen more and more, but I understand it's really hard, but it's not that we're, again, I always have these like same catchphrases. We're not pulling the rug out underneath from anyone for their favorites. I think it's more or less just saying like, hey, these are optimized to have more long lastingness on skin. The character of the scent is still there. Maybe Woodforia, when you smell it, will be a little bit more of a yummier coconut than the previous coconut that you knew and loved about it, but it was a little bit yummier on your skin. So those are kind of a little bit of examples. It's not necessarily changing it so much that it's not recognizable, but it's making it a little bit easier and a little bit more, I would say, consumer friendly and a slightly less niche, but still different from the other brands that are on the market.
Yeah, how exciting and incredible timing for this episode and us talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also like, and this just keeps like being a thread in my head as you talk about fragrances, is you speak about them how I would like imagine a wine sommelier talks about like the notes in wine and how you're talking about these notes with fragrances. And especially when it comes to buying scents online as consumers, it can be really challenging because someone like me, I may know, oh, I like a vanilla scent, or I don't love a sweet scent, or I may know certain things, but I know with friends sometimes like we'll read a description and it's hard to judge, right? That's why it is nice when you can go into like Sephora and smell it or go in a store and smell it. Is there any advice you have for as consumers when it comes to purchasing fragrances online, like how we can make better decisions about what we'll like?
So I think what the phenomenon of definitely TikTok for me, I think the way that I would say influencers, or whether you're not necessarily an official influencer, I'm actually loving the way that they're speaking to fragrance now, because I think they're making it more, I want to say maybe the word user friendly, because I think to your point, it can get so complicated. I mean, perfumery is really based out of like France, right? So then you're seeing all these like fancy ingredients and you're like, okay, well, like what will this smell like on my skin? So even though, again, a lot of the brands in the US and what's sold at Sephora and whatnot definitely are tailored to be a little bit more commercial for the American consumer, I think when you're selecting a fragrance, I think just read reviews, because I think it's coming from, us, it's coming from people that wear it. That's like my biggest thing. And then to your point, we don't have, I think we're probably going to get smell-o-vision the way AI and CGI is. I mean, honestly, but in the meantime, I guess it is kind of going into your local store and smelling it. Or when I worked in the store sometimes for Bath and Body Works around like Black Friday and they would sell out of something, the sales associates are trained to say like, if you like this, then you'll like this. And I think that really stays true. Like that's like a constant, I think, in this world, especially even with color cosmetics. You're like, oh my gosh, well, they don't have my shade. And you're like freaking out. And then you ask someone, they're like, oh, well, they'll have this. So and it's so subjective too, but I think reading real reviews online truly help. I think some people reviews can take it a little too far, because I think, they might have had it's like a food review sometimes. They might say like, oh, I hate this restaurant. You're like, well, that's my favorite restaurant. So I think it's all super subjective, but I think it's like, if you like a vanilla, then you like a vanilla, and then you just ask that sales associate and they can help you. Or if you like boy smells, you can reach out to me and I will help you find your scent.
Amazing. Okay, Jessica. Well, we have chatted through so much throughout your career. It's been so interesting learning about this industry, hearing about how you got your start in it. I'm so excited to see the Boy Smells relaunch, and I can just see how proud you are of everything. Like, obviously, everything's displayed, and just how you speak of it, and just hearing you talk about it with such excitement is really inspiring to hear and makes me want to work in the fragrance industry as well. Like I can really, really sense your love and your passion for it. Do you have any last advice you would like to share?
I think taking risks, I really do. I think, don't be afraid. I think it's easier said than done, but I was staying in a company for so long, even though I loved it and I met some of my best friends, like my chosen family. I would say the best thing that I did for myself was really just listen to my gut instinct. The fact I even had dreams about like going back to beauty is really kind of interesting and strange. So just always follow your gut. Always don't be afraid. When you want to talk to people like within your organization of where you're working to like pick their brain, maybe there's a different department you might want to work in, set up those one-on-one touch bases. I mean, I think it's so important to like take control of your career, find a mentor, go out to networking events, things like that. I would say just do that. Put yourself out there. Don't be embarrassed. I mean, people say, people used to say to me, "Oh, you're a teacher's pet," and blah blah blah. When I, up in my industry, I was like, "No, I like this is my job. This is my career path. I'm not in high school. I'm going to do what I've got to do, and everyone should do the same. Just follow what you want to do, and the cards will fall from there."
I love it. Thank you so much, Jessica, for coming on Marketing Girly.
Oh, thank you.